Hello, everybody that's not at Apostacon. This is the Ramen podcast, and I've got Joey Kirk something or other. What's your name?
Joey Kirkman.
Joey Kirkman. Hey, this is the mind behind the Bedtime Bible Stories. And my first question is, why do you say after that Bedtime Bible Stories and then Bedtime Bible Stories and then the qualifier explicit?
Because we're nicer than the people that wrote the Bible. we actually give you a warning.
Okay.
So when you open it up and see all the horrific illustrations and the and hear the stories, then you're, like I said, we're giving you a warning. Unlike the Bible, which doesn't give you a warning and puts horrific things in the book.
Okay. Now I thought that I should mention we are broadcasting live tonight from the DoubleTree Hotel in Omaha, Nebraska. I can't believe that I was ever this excited to go to Omaha, Nebraska. But it
gets more exciting every year.
It happens to be Apostacon. Now, Apostacon last year, if you didn't make it, the Apostacon event last year was a very good one. Everybody had a good time. Went off without a hitch. It was a fantastic hotel. And we're at a different hotel, and I don't know what the amenities are or what makes this one special yet, but I've been told to expect more out of this one. One of the things that I'm expecting, of course, Loris Krause is going to be here, but also, drum roll, Neil deGrasse Tyson will be here tomorrow night.
Good time.
We're stoked about that. This is going to be a great event, and really looking forward to it. Now, when I was in Fargo last week, I got my first copy of Bedtime Bible Stories, and I'm sorry I didn't bring it with me. I thought that I had, but as I was rifling through my stuff, we were in too much of a hurry to get to the airplane when we woke up late this morning. So, Mark, you got your copy. Can you take it away?
I do. For the people that for the people that are watching on the YouTube, this is it right here. This is the copy that I have, signed by Joey. He signed it in Chicago for us. He signed it probably while wearing a Be Secular t-shirt, I think, which makes it even better. I don't know if you can see very well, but it's got many Bible verses written verbatim, right, Joe, exactly as they are in the Bible, and then illustrated descriptions of said verses. Like right here, let's see. Let me find it. Here's the ark.
Many of you pulled out.
Yeah. Can you see that? That's Noah's Ark right there. And clearly a mother holding the baby is being turned away to die. Clearly.
Right. And she's also dragging a dead child with her legs underwater.
And there's some crying animals, and I mean, it's some serious stuff in here. It should be noted.
The Lord's ways are not our ways.
Right. We have Joey on here because he's a great guy, and he's already in Omaha. I'm actually still in Maryland, going to drive Shannon to the airport for Apostacon tomorrow. But Joey and Bedtime Bible Stories is actually the sponsor of the Ramen podcast through the middle of November. So we encourage everybody to go and check out the website and buy a copy of the book. And whenever you buy sponsors' materials, it just helps the podcast. So we really appreciate that. And thanks for sponsoring us, Joey.
Oh yeah, man! Thank you. I'm happy to do it. I was excited. And real quick, I hope you guys like the banner that was made for you.
Yeah, that was also made by Joey Kirkman, the new Ramen banner, which is awesome.
Is that the one where you and I are both cyborgs?
Yeah, where we look like Kano from Mortal Kombat. Exactly.
That was actually made by one of my illustrators. And you can find him on Facebook. His name is I Am Pittner.
Oh, you know what? It's so funny because I didn't know him. I've since added him on Facebook, but when I posted it, somebody actually made a comment and said, that looks like something that Pittner made. And I didn't know who that was until you told me that. So
yeah, he's one of our new illustrators. The illustrator for the book is actually, the name that's on the book is Jason Ross, and it's actually a fake name. Our illustrator, he actually did a lot of work for Stan Lee back in the day, but he lives in a small town in Oregon, and he's afraid to use his real name, which is a shame.
And I looked up J.D. Shapiro. He seems to be pretty well versed in Hollywood and in the entertainment industry too, right?
Yeah, that's J.D. Shapiro is my co-author. He was the original screenplay writer for. You probably remember the movie Robin Hood Men in Tights.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Unlike some, I can affect a real British accent.
Yeah, that was excellent.
Yeah, Robin Hood Men in Tights. He had another one called We Married Margot, and he's been involved in probably 30 or 40 movies you've heard of, but I don't know all the names. But yeah, I met him in the comedy business about 11 years ago, and we've been writing partners ever since. He was trying stand-up out for the first time, and so we met in a comedy club.
So what I'm concerned about, or not concerned about, he's living in Oregon. This isn't what we would have thought would have been all that fundamentalist. And you said that he's afraid of using his real name, or was that the other guy?
J.D. Shapiro lives in Los Angeles. He's not afraid of using that's his real name on the book. It says illustrations by Jason Ross, and that's not the illustrator's real name, which he told me I could talk about that. But yeah, he doesn't use his real name. The town he lives in, Oregon, is about popular, and plus I've had a death threat that part of it was I got a death threat when I started promoting the book a long time ago, when we first got some of the first illustrations out. I had a few sort of threatening emails or messages, not emails, but messages on Facebook, but I got one that was really like, I'm coming to your door next week, I know where you live, and I know about your tax business, so I knew he had my actual address. So the way I handled that was I screenshot the death threat, and I branded this guy, a lot of this guy's relatives that I found on the family column, and within a few minutes, 2 or 3 accepted, and I started tagging them in this screenshot of the death threat. And that sort of scared my illustrator. He was like, yeah, I don't want to be involved in anything like that. And I don't either. But I thought the best way to deal with the death threat was put it out in the open, because if this guy's threatening to come to my door, obviously the more eyes that are on it, the better. But,
absolutely, yeah.
Aaron, have you gotten
how that came about?
Aaron, have you gotten your fair share of death threats over the years? Have you gotten your fair share of death threats over the years?
Well, now you're going to jinx me, because I've never gotten a one.
Wow, that's amazing. Maybe it's because you look so intimidating.
No, I got to explain. I've never gotten a death threat that's related to my activism. Now, in my previous life, yeah, a few, but but not for anything related to what I do now. No.
Huh. Yeah, I'm probably, and like I said, the other ones were just kind of people wanting to fight. This one was, I'm coming to your door and I know where you live. It didn't say I was going to kill, but I think that I'm with the book and the illustrations, I'm extremely blunt, and I think when you give your speech, it's extremely palatable, and I'm an asshole.
No, I'm pretty sure that I'm in the colon section of humanity as well.
Yeah. I just come across as a punk. You just come across as an educated scientist.
Again,
I don't know.
It's which part of your life you're talking about, because once upon a time before I was doing this, I used to run, my life was very different. And I had to people all the trying to be threatening. I've noticed with people with the death threats, and I don't mean to say with this generalization that this applies to you. More often than not, it's the people that give.
Yeah, there was a local Fox 8. I'm from North Carolina. There was a local Fox 8 story that I don't remember what it was about religion, but I don't remember the specifics. And in the comment thread, I posted a picture of the Noah's Ark illustration, actually, and made some comment back to this guy after he went on some religious rant. And that's when he started messaging me on Facebook, and it came through.
Now, this reminds me of what I was just doing a couple of days ago. I went to Austin to do the textbook review, and I'm putting together the video of that. I thought it was interesting. I thought it was fascinating. We've all heard these rumors about, or we've heard stories the Texas Board of Education trying to undermine education. We've seen how these people try to reword things to have it portray a whitewash, meaning that they want everything to be seen as white with no ethnic influence. They want their history to be white and right wing.
Mm-hmm.
So we've seen that for a while, and what has happened is, and this was really surprising to me, that a whole bunch of different publishers had voluntarily issued new books catering to a particular agenda, whether it was a political agenda or like the Christian right-wing kind of agenda. And the result of that was that we were giving testimony before the State Board of Education, wherein we're talking about factual errors in these textbooks, and what had come out to be represented was blacks, Hispanics, Jews, Sikhs, Hindus, atheists, of course, Christians, and Muslims. This huge group, I mean, it was at least 50 people showed up, representing all these different religious groups, all these different ethnic groups, all of whom saying that the history books that are under consideration for Texas, and of course that it decides a lot of the textbooks that the outside public also gets, was promoting a very ethnocentric, usually highly racist perspective. And
Wow.
all of these groups were saying were there to complain that their demographic had been terribly misrepresented and openly insulted. And they were completely correct. I mean, the things that the textbook said against all of these different groups, completely legitimate complaints. It stunned me that it wasn't just the backward people that the names you've never heard of, or the names that sound suspicious, like World View Publishing. Of course, that's going to be suspicious, and that got the most complaints, by the way. But it was also some of the mainstream publishers, the people that are already on the books, the people that are already respected. They were saying things in their text that were grotesquely inaccurate and also highly insulting. Saying that that the Muslims are far more violent than they actually are, and whitewashing any kind of negative history for Christians, and eliminating the whole idea of slavery altogether. They said that the reason they had a civil war was because the states were fighting over states' rights.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's
they didn't
always
specify
the argument, states' rights.
Yeah, they didn't want to say that it was the states' right to own slaves, because they didn't want to admit that there were slaves. Even though 4 years ago you had people that were on our Board of Education that were actually arguing for Jefferson Davis's arguments that slavery is endorsed in the Bible, therefore if we are to be biblical, we are to own slaves, and that's our defense. Something a little different now. Oddly enough, the Board of Education actually wasn't the villain in this situation. They were taking the complaints of factual errors that were being levied against the publishers that were published. The publishers who, up to this point, in many cases, had been respected, but were now pursuing an agenda. And the agenda, by the way, depended on the publisher, because some of the publishers, as you might expect, were promoting the ethnocentric Christian, what they call the Judeo-Christian worldview, which there is no such thing. Judeo-Christian means against the Muslims, against the atheists, and against all those other random assorted religions. There is no Judeo-Christian perspective. If you were to examine the Christian perspective and the Jewish perspective, they split in twain. The Jews, one of the things that the textbook said was that the Jews recognized Jesus as being a prophet of God, which of course is absolutely not true. He meets none of the requirements for the Jewish prophecies of Messiah. For example, just so people don't get confused about that, because a lot of Christians will tell me that Jesus meets these criteria for the Jewish expectations of the Messiah. He meets none of them. No. He wasn't a military leader. He didn't conquer all these places. He didn't take down Rome. He didn't do anything that he was expected to do. But we're giving testimony to the Board of Education, which normally, from my perspective, would be the villains in this situation. It was actually the textbooks, and the Board of Education and I were, and all of the other people that were testifying, despite the diversity of our backgrounds and our beliefs collectively, we were all against the textbook companies for their biases, regardless what the biases were, by the way. One of the people testifying, one of the books promoted communism rather than right-wing Christian the typical right-wing conservative view that you would normally expect to have promoted. There was some people that were promoting Hillary Clinton and some people that were promoting communism, and in either case they were doing it with an extreme bias, and I found myself siding with people on the Board of Education that I would never have believed that I would have ever had an agreement with any of these people. Like Ken Mercer and I were in complete agreement when I heard the testimony about the overwhelming bias promoting Hillary Clinton. And I have nothing against Hillary Clinton, but the way that she's being portrayed in the textbook is, as my wife put it, being biased. In her testimony, she said that being biased alone counts as an error, because you're only presenting one side, one perspective on this, and that alone is misleading. And there were some people that were complaining about a political cartoon. Very often they'll put in a political cartoon that is supposed to, be inflammatory and instigate your opinion one way or another, or it just shows the context of the time. But in this case, the cartoon that multiple people had complained about was presenting denigrating affirmative action and denigrating a lot of the people involved with it. It was casserole. It was alternative. There wasn't a contrast of positions. There wasn't even an explanation. It looked like the book is fully endorsing, in this case, the typical right-wing ideology that you would expect. It was a very bizarre meeting, and one thing I came away from that I discovered, and one of the things that I was concerned about was that, and a number of other people had testified about the same thing, was that how many times it was mentioned in various books that the United States was founded on Judeo-Christian principles, and the Constitution, this is a specific statement, the Constitution was based on a covenant between God and Moses.
I heard about that.
There were several historians and other people there that were complaining about all the references that supposedly Moses was in charge of everything, and that Moses was the first of the founding fathers, that the founding fathers had apparently cited, or the historians were saying that the founding fathers revered Moses over and above all of the other influences, and somehow or other the founding fathers would have listed all of their own influences, and Moses never appeared on their lists. But he somehow tops the lists when presented by the right-wing biases that we were hearing about. So I thought it was a bit remarkable that these people would be presenting just that they would be an actual person of real history, that he's a confirmed historic character. I must have forgot what state I live in when I mentioned this, and here I am thinking that all of these people, most of the people in the room are like seminary students. They're all about religion and everything, so they would have studied all of this. It was shocking to me that I would be the first person who would point out that Moses was very likely was definitely a composite of multiple other characters like Sargon and I can't remember, Judgment from Egypt and Hammurabi, for example. That these three characters at least, and then obviously a few more when you look at the context of the stories, and that he didn't really exist, or evidently didn't exist otherwise. I thought that this is the scholarly consensus. I thought everyone would be aware of this, that you can't treat Moses like he was a literal character. We know that according to the documentary hypothesis, that the priestly writers and the Yahwists and credited with right, none of that is attributed to a man named Moses. These are all attributed to different authors. I thought everybody in the room knew this. So imagine me going before the Board of Education and 100 or so very religious people in the room and telling them all that Moses never existed. I was such a popular person in that room. Other people were bringing up testimony after I spoke. They were actually in their testimony saying, "Can you believe he said Moses didn't even exist?"
Well, wasn't Moses
you flabbergasted them.
What's that?
You flabbergasted them.
I was surprised to have done that. I honestly thought that everybody knew that the existence of Moses was, at best, contested and a matter of faith.
Yeah.
I didn't really. I must have forgot. Like I said, I forgot what state I lived in and how literal these people are with all of that. But then, I don't believe Jesus existed either. And now think about it. If you're going to write a book about history and you're going to talk, let's say we're not talking about American history, we're talking about world history. What role does Lord Krishna play in the history of India? Are you going to describe Krishna as if he was a real historic person? I have to be questioning about some of these. Even the people that I like and endorse, like one of my heroes, for example, when I started looking up background information on Hypatia, I found that everything that we know about Hypatia, she was running the Library of Alexandria in 400s. She was assaulted by Christian zealots and skinned alive in a church.
That's right.
Yeah. So, but everything we know about Hypatia comes from one author. Ultimately, everything stems from one author. There is no way, therefore, to verify whether she actually existed. Now, this is a hero not just to myself, but also to Carl Sagan and to a whole bunch of different scholars who really revere this person, and we can't verify that she ever actually existed. You've got one source, and it's corroborated by nothing. So it's not a bias. You know, I was accused of having hostility against all these believers because I said that Moses likely never existed. I say Moses likely never existed because he didn't. He couldn't have. Why would God make a sequel, right? I mean, why, if Moses comes along and he does exactly, word for word, what Hammurabi did with the identical childhood that Sargon had, and his greatest stunt, parting the Red Sea, that stunt was directly taken from Judgment, who had lived in the same area 1,000 years before. Why would God rip off all the common stories that are already commonly known in the land? That doesn't make any sense. And the stories themselves don't make any sense. So I have it is not a bias, it's not a hostility, but I'm being accused of being hostile and being dismissive and hateful against these people who are trying to preserve their Judeo-Christian heritage, which many of these people testifying said that's what America's all about. And they most
of them wouldn't know the definition of Judeo anyway. I mean, Christian, they would think they know because they have their own flavor that they prescribe to, but if you asked them what Judeo meant, I mean, you'd probably get as many answers as you get faces, and none of them would probably be right.
Well, that's why I really liked that one of the people that was giving the testimony there was, at least one of them, was representing Jewish communities and was complaining that one of the history books said that Jews recognized Jesus as a prophet, as so forth. And there was actually two people representing Jews, saying that Jews were misrepresented and their belief systems were represented. The Sikhs were really well represented. I didn't have any idea that we had so many Sikhs in Texas, but the Sikhs, the Sikh community sent out at least 4 people to testify on their behalf, complaining about the way that they had been represented. One case, for example, one of the history books said that Sikhs, and I'm saying Sikhs because this is the way I was taught to say the word in the 70s, and I only found out last week that that's not even correct. It's not the Sikhs, it's the Sikhs. But what was I going with that? Oh,
you're all over the place.
The history books were saying that the Sikhs, that their religion regards and certain documents from within Islam, and that it was a blending of these two religions. And one of the great examples for why that could not be the case is that one of the six was arguing that it wouldn't be fair to say that Christianity is a blending of Hebrew and Greek prophecies, and for that exact reason, six can't be represented that way either. The amount of ignorance that was in the textbooks was just outrageous. I mean, they said that the Roman Empire made no contribution at all to math, science, or architecture. Really? What? The Greeks got credit for everything, and then the history book actually said, but the Romans contributed nothing.
Well, I didn't read the books, but I have to guess if they didn't give the Romans any credit for math, they probably weren't given any of the sub-Saharan African nations credit for anything either.
Oh, don't get me started on the sub-Saharan African nations, because get this. All right, so one of the textbooks said that people living in sub-Saharan Africa before the age of exploration, it said that all the people that lived in sub-Saharan Africa were black Africans of the Negro race.
Oh my God.
In the textbook for high school kids.
So this book I heard was published already, and they caught it before it's been distributed, right?
It's published, but they haven't sold it yet.
They haven't sold it yet.
So they're trying to get the classrooms to distribute this book. It gets worse though, because the same book said that the people that lived above the Sahara in Egypt, of course, were Hamites. If you don't know what that means, they were descended from Ham, as in one of Noah's children. This is a history textbook.
Well, they gotta account for all those people, Aaron. They can't just have them out there existing without any kind of accountability.
In my testimony, I pointed out that the Hamite race never existed. Again, so I said Moses didn't exist, the Hamites didn't exist, the Ten Commandments didn't exist. It's plagiarized from Hammurabi's Stela of Law.
He's asking for death threats now.
Yeah, they expected me to say that God didn't exist. They didn't expect me to tell them everything that they believe it didn't exist. But seriously, the Hamites, they had no evidence at all to conjure the Hamite race. They really didn't. The reason that there was a Hamite race, they had to conclude when they first discovered the ruins of the Egyptian civilizations, realized what a great civilization this was. Honestly, this is the real explanation. They decided that such a magnificent civilization could not have been constructed by Negroes. So they said that these races, that there had to be another race there that was white, because if it required that they be smart, then it required that they be white. So they made up this race and then named it after an imaginary person who's a descendant of Noah, completely made up. So I'm telling a bunch of young Earth creationists everything that they believe is wrong. And I'm sorry, if you ever look at all the realistic depictions of Akhenaten, for example, I mean, these people were black. Yeah, they can build stuff that can be really cool. Wrap your head around that.
Right.
But this was a product of 19th century bigotry, and I was also able to bring up that this type of racial classification had been rejected first by Charles Darwin, and I showed that in one of my speeches. I was talking the exact verbiage that he used to bring that out. And then 16 years later by Franz Boas, and Boas got the credit for it. And then by 1940s, the whole of anthropology had rejected that altogether. So they were trying to put 19th century bigotry that had been discarded universally by the early part of the 20th century. They're trying to include that in the 21st century, to the outrage of everyone who has any idea what they're talking about.
And they had Google and everything. They could have researched.
Yeah. And how long did it take for me to realize Hamites? The hell is a Hamite? I know something about anthropology. I remember telling Hamite. Oh crap!
So how did they? I'm really confused. How did they get this far with it? how do they get to?
Well, they published it within their own community and within their own echo chamber of truth. So everybody they asked said, "Yeah, that's right. That's how it was," and they just kept going.
Somebody publish it, though. It doesn't. This seems like they have some moles at the publishing level.
And I got
being a conspiracy theorist there.
Yeah, and I got to remind you that it wasn't just the people that were advocating for the typical perspective that you get from the young Earth creationists on the religious right conservative side. There were people that were also advocating extreme, and I'm going to say far left extremism, because when it's one thing to understand the advantages of some aspects of socialism over some aspects of capitalism. People get really upset if you say that capitalism is not the be-all, end-all, ultimate system, and that there are applications where a socialist perspective works better in these specific instances, because these people don't think about nuance. Right? Everything is a dichotomy. It's either you have free market, unregulated free market capitalism, or you have communism, and that's black and white, and that's all they got. And it's very disturbing to have a conversation with some of these people. I got to mention that when I mentioned that Moses evidently didn't exist otherwise, again, I thought I was talking about a scholarly consensus, right? Because my statement was that rabbinical scholars admit this, and that's true. They do. If you get, and same with seminary students. Really, I mean, anybody that really studies the Bible and really studies archaeology and so forth, well, they will come away and say, yeah, we don't have any indication that any of this really happened, or if it did happen, it didn't happen that way, right? I thought that every academic, every scholar knows this, and so right away. I found myself challenged, and this was somebody I wish I could reach out to. We had a very intimidating man in a full uniform. I don't remember what he was for, but he got in my face to say that Moses was a confirmed person in history, right? I'm talking to a grown man who I'm inclined to give respect to, and I want to give respect to the man, but he's obviously got no idea what he's talking about in this instance when he's telling me that Moses is a confirmed person in history, and he's not going to listen to anything that I say. And it doesn't matter what references that I have. It doesn't matter what historians I can cite. It doesn't matter what senior rabbi I can cite. It doesn't matter. He's got this other position, and he says, it doesn't matter what you tell me because you're an evolutionist, and that's dead too. What? They've disproved evolution. DNA disproves it. Where do I start with this? Right, because I tried to tell this guy, you have absolutely no idea what you're talking about. DNA does prove it, and I can prove it to you. I can prove it to you any way that you want. I wanted to have that guy on our show. I'd love to have that.
He still can come. Where is he?
He ran out of the room when I told him that I can prove this any way that you need to, and he says, no, it's already been disproved. No, you can't. Yes, I can. No, you can't. Right? And he's backing up out of the door. And like I said, just by virtue of the uniform and what I would expect that to entail, I want to offer this man respect. But he doesn't have any idea what he's talking about. I said, look it up. Why are if you're agreeing to this, why are just for example, why are humans right now classified as apes? And he says, we're not. And so, yeah, it is. And I started to give you, but he interrupts everything that he says to find some way of segueing back and getting out that exit, right? Mm-hmm. And
it's frustrating.
Yeah. And so when I said, well, you want to tell him to look up anything, and he says, no, you look it up. Stanford. Stanford? Really? Stanford? That's your citation? Stanford. DNA disproves evolution. Stanford. And so that's why you have the entire worldwide scientific community universally saying that evolution is a fact, period, and then you've got one guy who tells me Stanford, DNA disproves evolution, and yet none of these scientists worldwide, absolutely none of them, are aware of this. I would love to have that. Wouldn't that be great to have the guy on the show? Can you show me one person ever that heard this story about Stanford and show me how it disproves it? I'd love to have that.
Great.
This guy wanted out of the room.
It'd be great to have him on the show with some evolutionary biologists from Stanford. You know, have them on the show too.
Yeah, and he was angry though. And it's funny thing about how some of these people, you hear the story about when you plant a seed of doubt in their minds, and it's clear that a lot of people didn't expect anything that I said when I was in there, because I mean they were shocked they'd never heard this kind of stuff before, and that's a little disturbing to me when these people have heard nothing of what I'm even talking about, yet they're claiming to pass legislation on education when they've got no freaking clue. I know it was a very frustrating conversation, and I was angry that I couldn't. Not angry. I was actually sad that there was no way I could reach that guy, because he just wanted to get out of that conversation, and he was angry that he was not intimidating me by telling me, you know, DNA disproves evolution. Stanford, look it up.
In that situation, a lot of times people just want to voice the anger and the frustration they initially felt when they heard you say it. They don't want to hear you say anything back. They don't want to continue the conversation. They just want to. You made them so frustrated that they want to say that and then get out of there, because they don't want any more of that frustration.
Yeah, well, after I gave my piece, a number of other people had mentioned the Moses thing, and they were all outraged and aghast. And I'm not including everything in the video that I'm uploading, because I recorded 4 hours and 47 minutes worth of video. And I do want to say this though. When I walked into that place to give the hearing, there was this one guy that showed up immediately that just wanted to meet me and shake my hand because he had seen all my videos and all of this. And I was very appreciative, and he's going to give his testimony. He was testifying on how Native Americans had been misrepresented in our textbooks.
Oh, I bet that was a nightmare.
I don't know. Frustrating thing was that we ended up going off to someplace for lunch, and then we found out that they were reconvening before we thought they were going to. We thought we had like a full hour or whatever, and no, they weren't doing that. It was like a half-hour thing that they were doing downstairs and then coming right back in. So we couldn't make it back into the building in time. So I called a friend of camera so that I could get all the testimony before, since I can't get it back in the building to turn it on myself. He did get around to doing it, but he didn't turn it on in time. So when I come in, I see this person. The film starts with this person saying, "Thank you very much." And so there's one person whose testimony I didn't get. One person, of course. Which guy was it? Right? The one person who's going to be looking for his own testimony in my video, and I felt really, really bad about that. So, yeah.
Do you have contact with him? Maybe we can get him on here.
That's a good idea.
That's not a bad idea. I believe his name. I know I'm going to mispronounce it. I believe he pronounced it something like Arroyo, but not quite Arroyo. It was close to that, but he'll know.
Probably look it up. I'll see if I can look it up, and I'll see if I can get him on here.
So I have a question about the Moses thing.
Yeah.
Okay. So if they're trying to assert Moses in these texts for public schools, what are they going to do when these young children actually research Moses? And wasn't he the one that told in the book of Numbers told the soldiers to kill the men and women but keep the young virgins for themselves as spoils of war? Like, how is he like a role model for a founding father in the first place?
The argument is that okay, so Moses sends out all these people to wipe out this other group simply because they don't believe what Moses believes, right? And so he commands that his people go in, raid these people's houses, burn everything to the ground, kill their animals, kill their grandparents, kill their fathers, right? And so the guys bring back the mothers and the children. And Moses gets mad that you let the mothers live. So he commands his followers to go and murder the mothers in front of their own children, or murder the baby brothers in front of their own mothers, and then murder the mothers right in front of the sisters, and then and he specifies that you're going to kill the males among the little ones. Mm-hmm. Now, there's only one way I can interpret little ones, and I understand that in the Hebrew tradition, they have this thing, that the bar mitzvah, whatever. It's like you're 13 and you're in. Obviously, this correlates with puberty, right? So we're talking about prepubescent kids. Murder all the males among the prepubescent children, but keep the prepubescent little girls for yourselves. And there's only one way to interpret that, but the argument that you hear is that these guys who murdered their whole families, their grandparents, everything, burned everything to the ground, stole everything that they had, murdered their mothers in front of them, then took, and you know what they're going to do with them. But the apologists would say that they were not immoral purposes. Because for some reason, the mothers and the fathers and the brothers, this is not immoral. Enslaving the little girls is not immoral somehow. It's amazing to me how you justify all of this heinous atrocity to try to pretend that any of this came from a superior being, much less a supreme one.
And exactly. And what does that say about the people today who are trying to insert him into an educational textbook? How are we even here? Why am I not hearing the Twilight Zone music right now?
You know what somebody ought to do is
that's insane.
Somebody ought to come out with a book exposing these kind of heinous atrocities from the perspective of somebody who doesn't believe that shit.
And they ought to have it animated. They ought to have it animated and have the words verbatim from the Bible in there. How come someone does that?
Actually, when he was saying that, I was thinking that story needs a short film, not an illustration, because there's a lot going on in there. But still, how does he end up in a textbook? Why would they want him there? Is it? I'm blown away by that.
The least of my complaints on this is that Moses complained that his men were being merciful. How dare you be merciful?
Wow. Yeah, so that goes right alongside of my book. So, there you go. And that's what we tried to do was I'm just saying
I wanted it to come back to that. So
just we mined out a lot of those gems. I mean, we did some of the ones everyone knows about, like Noah's Ark and Elijah is jeered, where God is directly implicated in killing 42 children.
Let me bring up one of my favorites. In Genesis 32. We have Jacob, I think his name was Jacob. He's wrestling God. You remember this one?
I don't. We didn't illustrate it, but I know what you're talking about.
Okay, but just think about this story.
Okay.
If you're doing an update, maybe. This is one of my favorites because Jacob is wrestling God and beats God, even though God cheats. And the way that he cheats is very good because they say that he touched Jacob in the hollow of the thigh. Now, as we know from other references, the thigh refers to a limb or member, and they're talking about his crotch. So God basically hit him in the nards.
Okay, I don't know this story. I want to know it. We can illustrate this.
And even though God cheated with a crotch shot below the belt, Jacob still wins. And this is the beautiful. God is pinned down and has to beg Jacob to let him back up. And that's not the outrageous thing. It's the reason why God needed to be allowed back up. Go back and read Exodus 32. Read the argument between or the wrestling match between Jacob.
Genesis 32.
Yeah. What did I say?
You said Exodus. Too many Newcastles.
Not yet, but I'm working on it. Anyway,
God taps out.
Yeah, God taps out and says he's got to be let loose. Why? The reason is because gone. And if you go, I can't get the sun to come out.
How did I miss this series?
So yeah, so he has to let, and then this is when God changes his name. It's Israel because you have wrestled God. But the thing is, God has got to be let go because if Jacob holds him down, the sun won't come up.
Good one. Crotch shot, then a tap out.
Now, one of the problems is that being an atheist, I've had to explain this to believe and to try to find a metaphor. We've known that other thing in this chapter, but in the fruit of.
Okay.
Right. And so, what is the fruit? The fruit of is a metaphor in every other incident except Genesis. For this will be the result if you continue down this course, right? If you do these things, this is what's going to happen. That's the metaphor. Except in Genesis, when you have the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, it doesn't mean that if you follow the path of knowledge and understanding that you will never be able to go back to your period of childlike innocence again. You can't have this kind of a metaphor, even though the rest of the book uses it repeatedly. In this instance, that metaphor has to be real fruit that comes from a tree that you could cut down and build a canoe out of if you had to. It has to be literal there, but not anywhere else when the exact same term keeps coming up. But I'm just being hostile to the religion, and it's probably because I hate God, and it's probably because I love sin.
So, Aaron, what? I know that you're speaking this weekend at Apostacon. What are you speaking about?
Oh, I'm giving a work. I'm not actually speaking. I'm not giving like a presentation. I'm doing something I've never done before. I'm giving we're doing a workshop here in how to deal with the believers in the type of arguments that they get into. Simple things that you commonly encounter, what you normally expect, and why they're coming at you from this angle, and how to deal with that. One of my examples, for example, is in how every time you get into an argument with a believer, if they are an actual apologist, if they know this argument at all, and they've argued with a few evolutionists before, right, or however they want to generalize this, it comes down to, for whatever reason, in order for their perspective to be real, reality can't be. So one of the first things I want to argue is that you don't really know anything. You can't know anything. And there's several arguments that they'll approach with it. You can't know everything. You can't know anything unless you know everything. You can't know that this one thing is wrong unless you know what is right and you know everything that is wrong. You have to have God's knowledge before you can prove that there's no God, or before it's sufficient to say that there's no reason to believe in a God. Just as an example, reality can't be right unless their belief system is right first.
Well, I have one. I didn't know you were talking about that, but I actually want to bring this up. One thing that I hear a lot is if things that we know now disproved things we used to know in science as we go through the studying of new facts and things we discover, if we keep discovering things we thought to know as right are now wrong, how do we know we won't discover the things we know are right now to be wrong later? And somehow that means maybe we'll find God one day, because
it somehow, well, science has been wrong before, maybe science is wrong now, but the thing is that science works like a game of 20 questions. And every new piece of information that you obtain will change your perspective, but it's zeroing in on a more refined or more closer to the target. It's not ever the case that science was just completely wrong and then come up with some other blind ass idea and then they were completely wrong about that too. No, that's never happened. And one of the things that they bring up would be that I was taught as a child that the reason that Columbus sailed west was not to understanding that the world was round, but that he sailed west to prove that the world was round. But I was taught in school and shown films depicting that the reason Columbus did this was to prove the world was round, because that was a contested belief at the time. And then the lesson that follows that is that science used to believe that the world was flat, and now we know better. So see, science was wrong before. And it doesn't matter that from the inception of science by the Ionian Greeks, that one of the very first things that scientists ever determined was the sphericity of the Earth. That's one of the very first discoveries, and it was thousands of years ago when Isaiah and other books in the Bible are still depicting the world as flat. And also, interestingly, if you go back to Hindu scriptures, which are older than the Bible, they had some very, very progressive thoughts because they were capable of understanding that the earth was part of a universe where the Bible never made that association. The Bible actually thought that the planet Earth was the biggest thing else existed on, and all of the stars all came into existence 4 days after the Earth, and they came into existence only to light the Earth, and so that people could look up and say, ooh. And that these constellations, they're not levity jillion miles across, right? They don't exist hundreds or thousands of light years away. They're all tiny little pinpricks in a series of perforations in an imaginary firmament that exist only so that we can imagine constellations, so that we can use them as signs and seasons. That's the only reason they exist.
So the talking donkeys are made of stardust.
There you go. There you go. I mean, if everything's made of stardust, then talking donkeys must be made of stardust as well. That's just that's logic right there. Checkmate, atheists.
The talking. I went on like a talking donkey 3-week rant one time on my social networking sites, and I actually had a girl from high school who was a Christian message me and say that actually was what flipped the switch in her head. That there's a talking donkey. And I said, yeah, and I gave her the scripture word. And a couple days later, she messaged me back. She was like, this is some whack stuff. I could never tell my daddy this. But this is some whack stuff. You know, most Christians don't know there's a talking donkey made of stardust, of course, in the Bible.
Yeah, most of them won't read the book, and then when they do, it's really disturbing. You've got some honest people out there.
So, Joey, you're at Apostacon. Your Bedtime Bible Stories is a sponsor for Apostacon, right?
Well, we're sponsoring the Aposta Comedy Show.
Okay, and I think I saw something where people can get the book with like a discount or something during Apostacon. Was there a code or something like that?
That was a 3-day ebook sale that we had.
Ooh.
Coupon code.
So you missed it, suckers! All you suckers out there, you missed it.
Yeah, sorry, that was a couple weeks ago. But can I mention Dogma Debate? Is there one on there?
Yeah, say whatever you want.
I'm just kidding.
Did you puts his hand in front of the mic.
Yeah, like nobody could hear that anyway.
It's between me and you. No, there is. Did you want to finish your point from a minute ago? I think there was some lag.
Okay, finish your bit first, and I'll go back to that.
Okay, well, we do have if someone wants a good deal right now, the cheapest place to buy the book is actually through dogmadebate.com. If you go to their homepage, you'll find Bible Stories cover that you were holding up a little while ago. If you click on that link, you get 10% off plus free shipping anywhere in the United States, and that's actually cheaper than anywhere, including if you bought it through me. Because they got it. Yeah.
You do have it for sale at Apostacon, though, if people are listening to this tomorrow morning.
We do have some books for sale here, but I will tell you, they have been selling really well. And the ones that I actually had in my office, we bought a ton of them about 6 weeks ago, and we're down to 30 for this weekend. And I never expected that, but it's been a really good roll for us over the last month and a half or so. But we have 30 books here, but what we're going to do is I brought my wife, Lindsay, and my daughter, Macy, with me, and we have a booth at Apostacon, and we're going to set up the computers, and we've brought some sketch prints that have never been offered anywhere else before, and these are some of the early drawings, penciled-out drawings, and they are prints, but they're numbered, and we're giving those away free to people who purchase them, and we're actually going to have Amazon ship the books directly through them once we're sold out here. I think we will sell out here. There's a lot of people coming this weekend.
And the website is bedtimebiblestories.com.
My website is bedtimebiblestories.com. If you buy through there, you're going to be paying a higher price than if you went to dogmadebate.com and clicked on their link.
There you go.
Penn Jillette said on one of his episodes of Bullshit, Penn Jillette said that if you want to create atheists, you need to read the damn Bible, because nothing will get you there faster than reading the Bible. Because, as I said, you've got some honest people in there that, were they to read the Bible, they would. It's typically reported that the catalyst that turned people away from belief was finally cracking open that book to finally read it at last. Now, you've got other people that have been programmed to read it in the Spirit,
right,
and who do things like what they call eating the Word, which is when they force themselves to believe whatever the hell it says. But not everybody can be that dishonest. We've had people say that if the Bible said that 2 + 2 = 5, they would believe it. If the Bible said that Jonah swallowed the whale, they would believe it. Those people can't be reached. But most people are not that way. Most people think that the Bible is something beyond their comprehension, and that there's maybe some loftier way to understand it. So they will turn to their authorities. When they read the Bible and it doesn't make sense because it can't, then they will turn to their authorities to explain, what the hell does this mean? And as a child, I did something similar. But the fact is it really does read that way, and it's really a terribly boring book. And so if there are other ways of representing, the Brick Bible does another good example of this too, by the way. So there are people that can't ingest the Bible the way that it is, but if you include illustrations on top of the actual verbiage to show that this really is what it says, then this is what prompts people to think. Because when I read the Bible, I remember asking everybody around me, nobody can tell me. How would you describe the firmament? People are supposed to make sense of this in reality, and when the firmament is described as a giant crystal dome that has windows in it that lets the rain in, what the hell is that supposed to be? And the sun and the moon and the stars are all supposed to be inside the firmament, like stapled to the top of the firmament in the expanse of the... What the hell is a firmament? Nobody can explain it, right? So they all think that there's some loftier scholar somewhere who can explain it. No, that's why they call it apologists. There's people making up excuses to dismiss all these other questions.
Yeah, and as soon as you hear someone say, well, God is sovereign, that's the one that kills me, because that's like God's mysterious. It's just, where do we go from there? Where does the conversation go?
Anytime you read the Bible and it doesn't make any sense to you, it's because the Lord works in delirious ways.
There you go.
We have one of our, I guess, most hated illustration is where God commands the soldiers to not only kill the men and women, but to rip the babies from the womb. Illustration, and if I could just tell a quick funny story. When I sent the bullet points of what I wanted to my illustrator, I didn't hear from him for about a week, and we had deadlines because the book was coming out Easter no matter what. Finally, I got in touch with him, and he said, man, I just can't do that illustration. I said, well, look, I understand. Just do what you will do on it, and we'll see. We'll take it from there. Because I didn't want him to quit, obviously. And he had some problems with it. But what he gave me back was worse than what I was asking for. There's an illustration. The illustration for that Bible verse is a soldier's holding a baby by an umbilical cord over his shoulder with a smile on his face, and there's a mother with her womb ripped open. And we had to be that graphic. Of course, my illustrator took it he put the baby there, but that does depict what the actual Bible verse said. It says, rip the babies from the mother's womb. So we put it in there, and our whole thing is, if Christians get angry at us, or even sympathizers get angry at us, we constantly say, it's in the Bible. Are you angry at what's in the Bible, or are you angry at us for exposing it, illustrating it? Either way, it goes back to the Bible.
Did you show anything about the abortion performed in Numbers 5?
No.
That's too bad.
Did not.
It's too much, Aaron. That's just too much. You went too far.
I think we do say in the book, though, with that illustration, when you're reading just before it, we do say that so much for God being pro-life, which you've heard that before, because he commands that the soldiers rip the babies from the womb. What did the babies do? Those babies were innocent, right? You have to be born into sin, right? So they weren't born yet. So why were they slaughtered?
Well, the interesting thing,
sovereign.
When you go to the Bible as a moral guide, you got to remember that according to Jewish tradition, and who was it that wrote the Old Testament anyway, according to them, that an unborn fetus is only water for the first 45 days. And after that, it is a limb of the mother, specifically the thigh is the analogy, and that it doesn't become infused with the spirit to become a living soul until it is born. So you can perform, and there are Hebrew documents that detail how to perform a partial birth abortion.
Wow.
Yes, but in Numbers 5, God performs abortions for as trivial a reason as the guy goes out on a hunting party, he comes back, he finds his wife is pregnant, he does the math and realizes that the conception period was probably when he wasn't home, and so he accuses her of being unfaithful to him, and he wants to have her fidelity tested. So he takes her to a priest, and the priest then casts a spell on her and makes her drink a potion, and the potion, enchanted by God, will either cause her womb to discharge, is one translation, or will cause her thigh to rot, which is the colloquialism attached to the same thing. But in either case, it is an abortion. If the fetus falls, the womb discharges. If she miscarries, if she loses that baby, then the baby was never of the father. And she will be barren. And the Christians will argue that, well, okay, all it says is that she will be barren. I'm like, yeah, but what if she was pregnant to start with? It doesn't say she was pregnant! Because there's no way of arguing out of that. That's an abortion, clear and simple, and it's done with God's intent and the priest's acknowledgement and the potion that God has to enchant in order for any of this to happen. There's absolutely no defense for it, and the woman is shown to have utterly no rights. There is no circumstance wherein a woman can accuse her husband of cheating on her, because if a husband cheats on his woman, all he has to do is move the bitch into the house and she's his. Because he can have all the concubines that he wants.
Handy, isn't it? That's a handy little rule.
You're going to get death threats now.
Joey, putting your hands in front of the microphone doesn't do anything.
Dang it. You got me again.
So we're running. We've ran over on time, and I know that the people on the podcast have begged us to keep it to an hour because we don't want 3-hour podcasts. We want to do hour-long podcasts. Yes, so just to recap, Aaron's doing his workshop at Apostacon. Aaron, what time are you doing it? If people are hearing this tomorrow morning on the podcast,
I believe that's going to be 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm doing it at the same time as Margaret Downey and a number of other people. So we're not really sure how we're going to negotiate that and be fair to everybody, but I understand it's supposed to be 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Okay, so everybody catch that. Go to the Bedtime Bible Stories table with Joey and his lovely, lovely wife. Will she be in her Arab mistress uniform tomorrow or no?
Yes, my wife, Lindsay Kirkman, will be Burqa woman again. She plays a game at the booth called Bible or Quran. So she gives scripture to people, and they have to guess whether or not it came from the Bible or Quran. And we have prizes. And my daughter Macy's here, and she's playing Ralphie Ralph the Puking Squirrel, which if you go through the illustrations of the book, Ralphie Ralph the Puking Squirrel is like Where's Waldo. You got to find him in every illustration. There's a lot more to that story. By the way, Aaron Ra is in this book, and
he is him and Jamila Bay and
the
rest of people.
Yeah, the whole American Atheist crew is in there. David Silverman wrote the foreword for me.
I see. That's a great picture.
When I was messaging David way back in the day, I was like, we should surprise the staff and make the staff of American Atheists the disciples. So David Silverman plays Jesus in one of the illustrations, and the entire staff of American Atheists, or the core staff, I should say, are the disciples in that illustration.
So this may be something you didn't know. In your picture, it's actually a picture, not an illustration, of Nate Phelps holding the signs. Those were made before last Apostacon in Omaha, and Shannon and I actually helped make those signs at Sarah Moorhead's house. That's how small the world it is.
Yeah, so, we paid homage to Nathan Phelps in the book, and we have Shirley Phelps holding up a sign with his promoting his website. There's a lot of funny stuff in those illustrations.
You got it. You guys got to get it. You got to get it. And Shannon and Jennifer Lovejoy from Carolina Secular Conference, which is in October. I don't know if you're going to that, Joey. That's in your neck of the woods. Carolina Secular Conference is not in October. It's in September. It's next weekend, actually.
Yeah, it's right. It's in Charlotte, right?
Yes, she will be at the table with Shannon, and we are debuting a new Be Secular shirt that is it's crazy. Actually, you need to go to the restroom before you see the shirt because you will shit your pants if you don't. That's how good it is. Yeah, you will. And I'm super excited for it, and nobody knows about it. Even Aaron doesn't even know what it is yet, but he's going to see it with everybody else.
Real quick, where are you going to be next weekend?
Me? I'm going to be here in Maryland.
Shannon is at a different conference. Where is she?
She's going to the Carolina Secular Conference in Charlotte.
Okay. For those that can't make it out that far, I'm going to be in an East Texas conference in Nacogdoches, Texas.
There you go.
Trying to drum up them death threats.
There's lots of stuff going on associated to the Ramen podcast, and it's many outreach networks like Be Secular and Bedtime Bible Stories. Thank you for listening to the Ramen podcast. Thank you, Joey, for sponsoring the show and being on the show with us. If you're in Omaha, make sure you see Joey and Aaron and Lalandra and Shannon and everybody else that's associated with the show. So
it's a good event if you're in range to attend.
Okay, send us out, Aaron.
Good night.